All right, let's dive into one of the most confusing and, let's be honest, one of the weirdest chapters in the entire Bible, the food laws from the book of Leviticus. Get ready, because we are about to unlock a 3,000-year-old code.
So, let's just start with the big, obvious question that I'm sure you've wondered about. Why would ancient Israel be told they couldn't eat pork or shrimp, but a crunchy locust was perfectly fine? I mean, it seems totally random, right? Well, as we're about to find out, there's a really fascinating logic hiding just under the surface.
So, where does all this come from? We're talking about Leviticus chapter 11. You can think of it as a kind of divine menu from way back, around 1400 BC. It lays out this really complex system for what was considered clean and okay to eat, and what was unclean. It covers everything, land, sea, and air. But what exactly were the rules?
Okay, first things first. Let's take a closer look at the specifics on this very, very strange menu.
All right, so here's the breakdown. The rules are actually super specific, almost like a scientific checklist. For animals on land, it's a two-part test. They have to have a completely split hoof, and they have to chew the cud. Both. No exceptions. For sea creatures, same deal, another two-part test. They got to have both fins and scales. Now for birds, it's a little different. The text just gives this do not eat list of about 20 birds, which are mostly predators or scavengers. And insects, well, most of them are off limits, but there's this really specific exception for bugs that have jointed legs for hopping, like locusts, crickets, and grasshoppers.
And this is exactly where some of our favorite foods fail the test. A pig, for example, has that split hoof, so it passes part 1, but it doesn't chew the cud, so that's a fail. A camel? It chews the cud, but its foot isn't fully split. Another fail. And when you look in the sea, things like shrimp and lobster, no fins, no scales, a big fail. So you see, it isn't just random. There's a system here. But what is the system for?
And that brings us to the first major clue, and this is where it gets really interesting. For centuries, everybody just assumed these were some kind of ancient health regulations, but modern scholars have figured out the real reason is way deeper. It has nothing to do with hygiene and everything to do with theology and a grand vision of cosmic order.
Yeah, the whole point of these laws can be summed up in one word: holiness. But here's the thing, in this ancient way of thinking, holiness didn't just mean being morally perfect. It meant being whole, complete, set apart, conforming to your proper category in God's perfect created order. The goal was for the people of Israel to literally live out this divine quality every single day.
And the scholar who really cracked this whole code was an anthropologist named Mary Douglas. She came up with this brilliant, simple idea: dirt is matter out of place. Her point was that the food laws aren't about things that are unsanitary. No, they're about things that are ritually disorderly, things that just don't fit the pattern.
This chart basically lays out the entire system. You see, the world was imagined as having 3 distinct realms: the sky, the sea, and the land. Each realm had its own ideal animal. In the sky, the ideal creature is a bird that flies with its 2 legs. In the sea, it's a fish that swims using fins and scales. And on the land, it's livestock that walks on 4 cloven hooves. So, any creature that blurs these lines, that crosses categories, is considered out of place. An insect that flies but has more than 2 legs? Unclean. A creature that lives in the water but crawls on the bottom without fins, like a lobster? That's an anomaly. It's out of place, and therefore, it's ritually unclean.
Building on that, another scholar, Jacob Milgrom, pointed out that these rules essentially democratized holiness. This big theological concept wasn't just for priests in a special temple anymore. Suddenly, every single meal in every home became a rehearsal of holiness. Choosing what you ate 3 times a day was a constant physical reminder to pay attention to order versus disorder, the sacred versus the common. But the story doesn't end there, not by a long shot. Hundreds and hundreds of years later, the New Testament introduces this huge plot twist that completely flips the entire idea of clean and unclean on its head.
And you can see the shift right here. The focus moves from something external, like ritual purity, what you eat, to something internal, moral purity, what's actually in your heart. The subject isn't about animals anymore. It's about the human heart and about people. And this is the real kicker. The purpose completely reverses. Where the original laws were meant to create a boundary to keep Israel separate, the new way of thinking uses the exact same language to tear down the walls between people.
This timeline really puts it all into perspective. For more than 1,000 years, these food rules were a key part of Israel's identity. Then, around 30 AD, Jesus comes along and declares all foods clean, saying what really matters is what comes out of your heart. And then, just about a decade later, the Apostle Peter has this vision where he's told, "What God has made clean, do not call common." But the point wasn't really about food. It was the green light, the theological justification for welcoming non-Jews, people who had been considered unclean, into the community. The idea wasn't just thrown out, it was radically transformed from a principle of separation into a principle of inclusion.
So, okay, why should we care about this ancient grocery list today? I mean, it seems so obscure, but believe it or not, its core ideas are still echoing in some very modern conversations.
It's pretty amazing, actually. The core principles from this one ancient chapter are now being reinterpreted and used to fuel discussions in 4 big modern areas: environmentalism, spiritual discipline, social justice, and even holistic health. So what does that actually look like? Well, in ecological ethics, some people now see these rules as a kind of ancient call for conservation, a way of respecting the created order. In spiritual discipline, the idea of using a physical practice like fasting during Lent to train your soul, well, that's a direct descendant of this logic. When it comes to social justice, this story becomes a powerful warning against any system that tries to label whole groups of people as unclean or out of place to justify excluding them. And in holistic health, it's a reminder that there's a deep, deep connection between what we take into our bodies and our overall spiritual and mental well-being. So in the end, this strange ancient menu does so much more than just solve the riddle of the pig and the locust. It challenges us. It forces us to ask a really modern question. If the whole point is about recognizing and restoring a sacred order, then we have to look around our own world, our own societies, our own lives, and ask, what is the matter out of place that we need to deal with right now?